The American labor movement is delivering like dominoes right now. We've seen strikes and unionization efforts at Starbucks, Amazon, Apple, and dozens of other industries.
Workers are rising up and striking back. There's more solidarity than we've ever seen before.
And it's easy to understand why working people are so fed up. CEO pay has skyrocketed into the fucking stratosphere, while middle and working class wages have stagnated since the 1980s. Take it from me, someone who once had a boss offer me a $25 Applebee's gift card instead of an actual raise. These labor movements are a big deal, part of this country's long-standing history of workers demanding better wages and working conditions. But if you're watching corporate media, the news coverage you're seeing about these movements probably looks like this.
An historic auto workers' strike could cause major disruptions to the economy and to consumers.
One of the most disruptive and expensive things that can happen to an economy.
Experts say the strike could cost the economy billions of dollars.
Food prices could skyrocket.
Lost wages, lost production.
Back-to-school deliveries could be affected.
What many experts are saying would be an economic catastrophe, especially right before the holidays.
The companies say the workers' demands are unrealistic.
Executives say the union's demands are not sustainable.
Analysts say a prolonged strike will push up auto prices and dramatically hurt the economy. Are you worried about either of those?
Do you believe a strike is worth it if it cripples the U.S. economy and costs up to $2 billion a day? Is it worth it?
Here are the top 3 ways corporate media screws over the American labor movement. Our first problem is a pretty big one. Corporate media usually don't bother covering labor stories at all. We nerds here at Media Matters crunched the numbers and found that year after year, cable news coverage of major strikes and unionization activity has been inadequate. Between January and April of 2021, major cable news channels didn't provide any coverage of labor stories like the carpenters' strike in Washington or the strike at a Volvo plant in Virginia, both of which boasted thousands of participants. And October only looks like that because of the Netflix walkout over Dave Chappelle's transphobic stand-up special, which wasn't even framed as a labor dispute. Remember the historic union vote at a Staten Island Amazon warehouse in 2022? CNN devoted a grand total of 1 segment to it. Even Fox News spent more time covering that story, which is really saying something. In the first 6 months of 2023, CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC combined spent just under 6 hours covering 5 major strikes and completely ignoring 16 others. Like, seriously? It's the 24-hour news cycle. What else could you possibly be covering?
That's Jack Smith getting lunch at Subway, spotted on this historic day coming out of Washington, D.C. Subway.
In a 3-year study, the 3 major corporate broadcast networks and CNN hardly covered labor disputes. Out of the roughly 46,000 news stories aired within that period, only 172 involved labor unions or activist groups. As one union vice president explained, it's not to the advantage to ABC or CBS or NBC to tell stories that make Walmart look bad or make Calvin Klein look bad. So instead, you get stories like this.
Christmas discounts in July. Amazon and Walmart holding Black Friday-like events this morning, offering huge sales.
Many major news organizations don't have a single dedicated labor reporter. So when the time comes to cover a strike or labor movement, it's going to be done by reporters who don't really understand what labor issues are all about. Which brings us to... We all remember the 5 W's of journalism, right? Who, what, when, where, and why. God, I miss J School. It was a simpler time. Well, when it comes to strikes and unions, corporate media outlets tend to ignore the why part. Media Matters took a look at coverage of the potential freight rail strike in late 2022 and found that the reasons why workers wanted to strike were either omitted or relegated to secondary information. And we see this omission happening over and over again. Compare how CBS described the demands of unionized UPS workers versus what they were actually demanding.
He's one of 330,000 employees who want wage increases and more full-time jobs.
Listen to how NBC described the demands of a teachers' union in Ohio.
Among teachers' demands, smaller class sizes and building improvements.
Part of this problem has to do with who news networks invite to talk about labor disputes. Mainstream news networks tend to prefer the voices of business owners over workers.
The companies saying the union demands are unrealistic.
Verizon has called the union's proposals unrealistic.
Executives say the actors' demands are unrealistic.
Unrealistic.
A 2021 Media Matters study found that workers or union representatives were only quoted in about half of segments about labor strikes. What happens when journalists rely on the voices of business managers? You get clips like this.
The union is asking for ambitious demands. Do you believe that they set those standards so high because they wanted a strike regardless of what the big three were willing to propose?
So, you're insinuating that UAW members are negotiating in bad faith and wanted to go on strike just for the hell of it? Because it's such a good time? Ignoring the voices of workers like this allows wealthy executives to control the narrative, shifting the focus away from workers' concerns and towards...
What could this strike mean? We know it could hurt the economy. What does it mean to somebody who's, for example, going out and buying a car?
Corporate media outlets might not care about the reasons for a strike, but they sure as hell care about the consequences of one. Just look at these headlines. How the UAW strikes could impact car shoppers. Strike against automakers could slow U.S. economy, trigger job losses. Hollywood strikes sap economy as industry readies for revamp. UPS strike looms. Will my Amazon packages be delayed? And those are just the print articles.
It could upend not just the car industry, but the entire U.S. economy.
Biden's in a tough spot. He either has to crush the unions or crush Christmas.
Respectfully, Mr. Jones. Are you fucking kidding me? This type of framing isn't necessarily a bad thing in theory. You could talk about the cost of a strike in order to pressure CEOs to give workers what they deserve. I mean, why are these greedy bosses trying to crush Christmas? But instead, news coverage tends to put the economic blame for strikes on unions.
Are you aware of the economic impact of this? It's a little less than a month right before Christmas here, but are you and your members willing to stop the rails, in effect, and accept those costs to the U.S. economy?
Corporate media frame labor disputes as random crises. The problem arises out of nowhere, unions throw a temper tantrum for no reason, and then they blow up the economy. But that frame is totally divorced from reality. Most Americans understand that working conditions are shit, and collective action is the best way to fix those issues. So the next time you see rich assholes on TV clutching their pearls about unions or strikes threatening the sanctity of Christmas, remember they're not working for you. They're working for their advertisers.
It would devastate the economy if we had a strike like that. So joining me now to talk about this and a lot more is Bank of America. It's Brian Moynihan, Chairman and CEO, one of the biggest banks in the world.